Ooh,
August 5th, and Putin had a heart attack.
we got in. We made it into the database, those absolute bastards.
Russian ships in the Pacific and Northern Fleet's nuclear submarines are under a new attack by the SBU. Iskander ballistic missile launchers have been blown up. Military airfields with strategic nuclear aviation are on fire. The SBU attacked facilities of Russia's nuclear triad.
Something's burning.
Factories that produce Topol and Yar's intercontinental nuclear ballistic missiles have been blown up. Russia's nuclear triad is under attack. Breaking news, friends, August 5th. And Russian nuclear submarines are under attack.
That was a massive hit, guys.
Explosions are thundering. The GUR and FSB hacked the system and obtained data on Russia's newest submarine, the Prince Pozharsky. This is a Bore A-class missile carrier with 16 silos for nuclear Bulava missiles, and it's under attack. The intelligence agencies now have the schematics, missiles, crew, combat instructions, and vulnerabilities of the submarines in their hands. And now explosions are rocking Russia. The nuclear fleet is no longer protected. Trump is ready for a new strike. Right now, an exclusive with Alexander Demchenko.
This is fucked up. This is episode 217. Say goodbye.
That really hit hard, guys.
This is fucked, gentlemen.
It seems to me that August will be bloody. Right now, Kirill Budanov's main intelligence directorate has received all the information about the Russian Federation's nuclear fleet, all the information about the submarines, especially about the Knyaz Pozharsky. This is the most advanced, most modern submarine of the Russian Federation. They got absolutely everything. They obtained all the data on vulnerabilities, everything about what weapons are installed there, what crew, how many sailors, who the captain is, who their associates are, who their families and loved ones are, where they live, what they do, what they don't do, and so on and so forth. What is the logistics of this submarine, the most powerful, as far as I understand, Russian submarine? And this is just my hypothesis. I don't know this information. It's my hypothesis that I'm voicing here. It seems to me that this data is already in the hands of the Americans on Trump's desk. The anniversary is coming up soon. 25 years since the destruction of the Kursk submarine, which sank under Vladimir Putin on August 12th, 2000. But in reality, Putin simply didn't allow the British and American submariners to save it. And then this fake information was spread that the Americans had shot something down, tried to attack. No, it was a faulty submarine from the start, which Putin sent out. They knew everything. Putin later covered for his generals, while the sailors drowned, died in agony, starving, without water, choking. They wrote letters to their children and their wives. And some of those letters still exist to this day. That's why it was a huge tragedy. And in fact, the whole story of Vladimir Putin began with Kursk and the major war against Chechnya. And I think that everything will end with another big war and the sinking of more submarines, with the destruction of Putin's nuclear fleet, Putin's submarines. I don't know where Trump's submarines are, but it seems to me that they're actually aimed at Russia. They've always been aimed at Russia. Let's not pretend otherwise. They've always changed their positions logistically. But you know what the point is, Dasha? The point is that Russians don't know how Trump's submarines move or where they are located. But American intelligence and Trump have all the information about where Putin's submarines are located. And I'm not laughing right now. I'm not joking or making anything up, because every single time, wherever Putin's submarine is, American fighter jets mark the spot from the air with flags and buoys. Is that really just a coincidence? It seems to me that they have complete information about Vladimir Putin's entire nuclear fleet, and they could destroy it at any moment. And Vladimir Putin, quite seriously, not for nothing, is pushing, scaling up, and escalating the situation to the limit, the nuclear situation. He took Donald Trump's threats absolutely seriously. Well, then those cowboys shouldn't have started all this fuss. Dmitry Anatolyevich Medvedev shouldn't have opened his drunken mouth. I understand that he's trembling and out of fear says absolutely everything Vladimir Putin tells him to. But still, he shouldn't have opened his nuclear mouth. They opened it. Now they have to deal with the consequences. But the problem is that all these scare tactics, Kapustin Yar, Oreshnik in Belarus, the militarization of Kaliningrad, and sending various types of missiles there, none of that will help because American Tomahawks have clearly demonstrated in Iran, in Syria, and wherever else that they can reach anywhere, whether it's a bunker or a portable toilet.
So, if the GUR and other Ukrainian intelligence agencies have indeed obtained this critical information about the Russian Navy's formidable submarines, does that truly mean the next possible and logical step could be that they might somehow be targeted for a decisive strike?
Here's how I'll answer that question. Let the experts figure out which submarines Putin still has left. Some of his submarines in the Pacific Fleet were seriously damaged during the earthquake in Kamchatka. 16 earthquakes in a row, by the way. Kamchatka shifted 2 meters away from Russia. Even the territories themselves are drifting away from Vladimir Putin after the earthquake, separating from him. Nothing has even started yet, there's no revolution, and Kamchatka has already separated. You see? It's gone, seceded. The earthquake is some kind of separatist, you know? But still, Dash. By the way, some people have probably already rejoiced that Russia's fragmentation has begun out of nowhere. Even nature itself, God himself, is already showing him that it's over. That's it. Nothing will remain. The regime is finished. The territories themselves are already breaking away from it, as if in anticipation of some big explosion somewhere in Russia. But you see, Dash, here's the point. The point is, I think there will be a strike on some of the most critical facilities, maybe even on Russia's nuclear sites, not necessarily a direct strike. The recent hacker attacks on Aeroflot, Avtovaz, and government services mean that they are directly disrupting Russia's and Putin's mobilization plans, as well as against a number of enterprises and medical centers. All of this suggests that the Americans could, at a certain point, take down even Putin's nuclear infrastructure. If the Americans have, and they do have, information about Russian submarines, it means they are prepared for any nuclear provocations from Putin. And, you know, if I were in the Russians' place, I wouldn't flaunt my nuclear potential. I wouldn't wave around my nuclear or semi-nuclear muscles, because that could end very badly. For now, Trump is only threatening sanctions. For now, Trump is still considering what weapons to supply to Ukraine and which ones to send. Now, just imagine if Ukraine gets everything, and on top of that, Tomahawks. And then American submarines approach somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea near the coast of Turkey, not far from Turkey's shores, and aim everything at the Ukrainian territories occupied by Russia. And they'll wipe out to hell, they'll wipe out the entire Russian military, all those armies. Because this is canonical Ukrainian territory recognized internationally, and no one has repealed the UN articles. Once Bashar Assad, though it's a poor comparison, asked Putin, according to the UN Charter, for help, and Putin went. So I think that Trump will go too in the end. And in this game, Putin will lose because he doesn't have the trillions of dollars and trillions of euros that America and Europe have to simply bury this Putin.
The SBU has once again carried out the special operation Web 2 and delivered a crushing blow to Russia's tactical nuclear aviation in occupied Crimea. Drones attacked the Saky airfield in occupied Crimea, Russia's key airbase for operations over the Black Sea. A Su-30SM was destroyed, another was damaged, and most importantly, 3 Su-24s, which are nuclear weapon carriers, were hit. What do you think is happening in occupied Crimea? Here we are blowing up Putin's tactical nuclear aviation.
Preparation for Ukraine's Independence Day. Most likely on August 24th, Vasily Vasilyevich Malyuga, FSB, or maybe not just him, perhaps Ukrainian intelligence, the intelligence community, both foreign and military intelligence, will put on a big fireworks show. A big salute, a big bang will happen there on the territory of occupied Ukrainian Crimea. Obviously, I think they won't stop trying to blow up the Kerch Bridge. The bridge. Maybe it will be Novorossiysk. The Black Sea Fleet is currently concentrated there. Some kind of major strike. Part of the Black Sea Fleet has been sunk. Maybe some bases on the territory of the Ukrainian Russian-occupied peninsula will be hit. I don't know. But obviously, this is not happening for the first time. And in recent days, we've seen this campaign escalate. First missiles, then drones, and now the direct destruction of Russian Sukhoi jets and truly crucial fighter aircraft that bomb the Ukrainian south every single day, or at least try to, starting from Odessa and further on toward Mykolaiv and beyond. So it's clear that this response is yet another special operation, a brilliant special operation by the SBU, absolutely surgically precise and meticulously executed. And of course, all of this undermines the Russian defense industry because producing an aircraft, you understand, is not like picking your nose like Putin does. In reality, it takes an enormous amount of work, not just months, but years to build such aircraft. And the Russian Federation simply doesn't have that capability. The engineers have died off, the old team is gone. The people who knew how to do things have already passed away or have long since become old men who no longer work or collaborate. That's why it's so difficult. They can't restore their long-range bomber aviation after Malyuk's web, after the SBU's web. Now, they have a big problem in Crimea because, as it turns out, Putin can't protect Crimea, despite the fact that he sent anti-missile and anti-aircraft systems from the territory of occupied Donbas, at least part of it, to Crimea. But even that doesn't help. The Crimean Bridge still has a steady trickle of traffic, just like before. People there are stuck for several days. They spend days in line just to get through. They're being kept waiting in Crimea, almost as if they're being used as human shields. But that's not surprising because Putin always uses people as human shields, since they're all terrorists. These are the people who organized this whole war, this whole bloody mess that they just can't seem to end.
Sasha, I just saw a 30-kilometer traffic jam in occupied Crimea. They're saying that long-range Neptunes are flying in and so on. These 30 kilometers, and on top of that, the FSB is conducting massive inspections, checking every car for 7 hours. What's going on? Is Crimea preparing for gradual deoccupation?
That's a good question, Dasha. I think that Putin is preparing for the loss of Crimea. Or maybe, even if Putin himself isn't preparing, they basically feel deep down that Crimea can't be held. No matter how you look at it, no matter how much they want it, no matter how hard they try to invest themselves, to write themselves in whatever verb they use there in history, in the textbooks and so on, nothing will work out. Everything that is ugly always falls apart. Everything that is unaesthetic. Take the Crimean Bridge, for example. It's unaesthetic. It won't be there. The Russian occupation is bloody. It's not just criminal. It's unaesthetic. It's maniacal. It's absolutely hypocritical, and that's why it won't last. Putin and his regime are absolutely rotten, and they won't last. Everything that is unaesthetic, everything that doesn't bring some kind of joy or a smile, none of that will last. We will remain, and they will not. So, well, listen, I almost started talking like Putin, with his story about who will stay where and who will end up in which paradise. But you see, Dasha, I think there will be big gifts, big surprises from the Ukrainian security forces, including the SBU, and also from various Ukrainian intelligence agencies. And these surprises will happen, including in Crimea. I actually think that in the near future, we can expect a lot of strikes, special operations, and fires, not just on the territory of the occupied Ukrainian lands, but across the entire territory of the Russian Federation. I think that in the near future, we should expect lightning-fast targeted strikes not only on Russia's most important military facilities, but also on decision-making centers. It seems to me that the cup of patience, not only of the Lord, but also of the Ukrainian people, and clearly of the West as well, has already reached its limit, so to speak. It has overflowed. From now on, there will be a major response and retribution for everything that has been done.
I saw that we destroyed an ammunition depot, the Saky air base. It's been paralyzed. Losses are already over $50 million, as has been reported. At the same time, right now, we are acting very intensively. I looked at the last month. We are striking railways, oil depots. We didn't used to attack oil depots this much before. We are hitting gas distribution stations and even gas pipelines. And again, today, in the Rostov region, we struck railway junctions. Once again, an entire railway system has been paralyzed. Sasha, is this already the beginning of a logistical paralysis in Russia? An aviation collapse, a railway collapse?
No, well, let's be honest, nothing is completely collapsing there yet. But I assume that, of course, these are targeted strikes on the rear, precise strikes on the rear, and an attempt to disrupt Vladimir Putin's summer-autumn offensive. What's much more important here, you see, is that it's not even about this anymore. Right now, news is coming out of Russia that forces us to talk about completely different things. Airspace has been closed over part of the Russian Federation. Kapustin Yar. That's where Putin's missile men are. Putin is apparently preparing some kind of nuclear test directly in order to raise the stakes, force events, escalate, and so on. We fully understand that Vladimir Putin did not just randomly withdraw, or rather lift the moratorium on the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the so-called INF Treaty. This was stated by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, by Peskov, and by Vladimir Putin's herald, the main one who has already been reassured by the Kremlin, Dmitry Medvedev, that they will respond, that they will raise the stakes. This is their answer to Trump's ultimatum. This is their answer to Trump's nuclear submarines. 2 submarines that are patrolling somewhere in the vastness of some unknown ocean, but obviously close to the territory of the Russian Federation. And all of this indicates that Putin is making a significant attempt to blackmail the West, to blackmail Trump. This is his response. In other words, fine, I'm ready for a Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. The problem is that Russia lost the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Soviet Union, Moscow lost back then. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev was sent to a dacha for many, many years by KGB General Semikasny, the head of the KGB, where he eventually died. And if Vladimir Putin now makes the same mistake, commits the same mistake, he will face the same merciless fate. Have you noticed that even his daughter, with Svetlana Krivonogih, Luisa Rozova, who is currently, as far as I understand, in Germany, gave an interview to Bild and basically stated that she actually hates her father, who, and I quote verbatim, destroyed her life and the lives of millions of people. So even members of Putin's family, his children, are now against him. There are quite a few forces there that are against this war, specifically against Putin, against the regime, who may have wanted this whole bloody mess to continue, but they definitely did not want it to be under Vladimir Putin's control. That's why I believe that August will be bloody.
Erdogan is in Kiev. What is the purpose of this visit? Why this trip? And what does it signify?
It's a strange story because, first of all, we're already hearing some denials, including from the Ukrainian ambassador. I don't know, I'm not ready to comment. All I understand is this. If Erdogan had come, it would obviously be about direct negotiations. Maybe he has already received some kind of signal from Putin. Maybe he is playing together with Trump directly in order to lure Putin onto Istanbul's territory. Maybe he is also ready for some decisive actions because, after all, well, for Trump, this whole story with Azerbaijan, with Crimea, it's a sensitive, it's a painful issue. It's something that concerns him. He once promised to protect the Crimean Tatars. He once promised to protect Azerbaijan. And now Vladimir Putin is simply trying to destroy both of them. That's why, for Erdogan, the destruction of Putin is also important, as it will help him strengthen his influence in the region directly, in the Black Sea region, the Middle East, and Central Asia. It benefits him. Erdogan wants Putin to be destroyed. Another matter is that for now, he is trying to play certain games and to get benefits, you see, from this whole situation. Because everyone has long been writing about this, that various sanctioned goods are passing through Turkey, and so on and so forth. For me, it would be important for Turkey, under pressure, including from Trump, to halt all these shipments of various goods, so that the Patris and Rubliovka would start to groan, and so that the war would come to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Then it would have a certain effect, because when Moscow and St. Petersburg start to groan, even the walls of the Kremlin will groan. This is extremely important. It won't be Kamchatka that changes the history of Russia, nor Rostov, nor Astrakhan, or Kapustin Yar. Maybe not Kapustin Yar, let's see, time will tell. But still, Dasha, it's always the capital that changes the history of Russia. The first and the second, either Moscow or St. Petersburg. That's why it's extremely important right now. You see that after the 8th, after August 8th, Trump doesn't back down, but instead goes all in to work across Russia. It's an untapped field there. Bomb wherever you want, shoot wherever you want, destroy whatever you want, but that's not even the most crucial thing. The most crucial thing is for Trump to sign off on the fact that it's time to destroy and remove the Putin regime. Because without destroying and removing this regime, the war will go on.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Sasha, so we're striking gas pipelines, gas distribution stations, hitting railway junctions, military airfields, and Putin's tactical nuclear aviation. We're attacking oil depots in Adler, Sochi, and Rosneft. But indeed, we do have a certain systematic strategy when it comes to logistics. But indeed, we're lacking the long-range missiles promised by America and also by Scholz. We're really lacking Trump's decisiveness. Now, Trump has said August 8th, August 8th. As I understand it, the Senate and the House of Representatives, Congress as a whole, are on recess, and they're not planning to come back, especially the House of Representatives, just for this initiative from Trump and Lindsey Graham Blumenthal. Most likely, the sanctions will only be voted on by Congress in September. So what are you expecting to happen on the 8th?
in order to impose 100% sanctions against the Russian Federation. And this is actually a court decision in America, by the way, because there has already been a similar case with other countries. Trump does not need a decision from Congress. Congress can vote, both chambers of Congress, the upper Senate and the lower House of Representatives, on their own bill, on the bill from Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal. That's a separate story about the 500% tariffs. But for Trump to impose 100% tariffs on India or on China or on Brazil or on South Africa or on anyone else, he doesn't need any permission from Congress. He is able to do it himself by his own order, by his own temporary decree. And I think he will go for it. Another thing is, he is absolutely right when he says, this is a very important phrase worth decoding, that he is not sure Putin cares about sanctions. So maybe Putin doesn't care about sanctions, but Russia as a country cares about them a great deal. Because the Russian economy will not survive the sanctions. And if the entire oil sector is hit, if there is an oil embargo, an energy embargo, and if the Indians out of the blue backtrack under pressure from Trump, right now this is the key question. Will the Indians backtrack or not? If Delhi gives in, if Modi decides to join Trump in punishing Putin to finish him off, then very dark days will come for Russia. I am predicting an absolutely nightmarish August, a black August for Russia. It will be like that because Russian August is always like that. Of course, there were problems even before Putin, but the Russian Federation had never experienced such constant incidents, these August incidents, as it has during Vladimir Putin's time. Now it knows them. I think Putin didn't just go to the Valam monastery for no reason. Did you notice that Lukashenko didn't want to get baptized there for sure? He simply refused to show that cross on himself. Maybe he's afraid that Putin will eliminate him, dispose of him, get rid of him. That's why, you see, they're all a bit crazy, you know? Everyone is afraid to jinx it. So it seems to me that this whole Valam story is, an attempt to atone for sins, but nothing will help. Nothing will help. Everything will burn. Everything will smolder. Everything will be in flames. The cup of patience is overflowing. Now there should be some kind of explosion. Now the climax should come. And we'll see how this climax ends, which way the story will turn, which way the story will unfold. That's the most crucial thing. I hope that Vladimir Putin will lose spectacularly, because after all, gradually, and I won't get tired of saying this, I will keep saying it, the board is turning in Ukraine's favor, no matter how difficult it is right now, and no matter how strange and bizarre that may sound.
Sash, panic in Russia's rear is also a very important topic. First of all, the governors of 5 regions have officially made statements on camera that there will be an internet and communications blackout. It has already started. It's nothing, just bear with it. And secondly, we're now talking about, for example, 30-kilometer traffic jams at the Crimean Bridge, inspections lasting up to 7 hours, more than 2,000 cars, panic among civilians, they're complaining. There are a huge number of videos, and Crimean Wind is showing them too. It's clear that there are flight delays all over Russia. The chaos in the rear is growing. Everyone is in parking lots. I see a huge number of videos where Russians are saying they're in parking lots, that things are landing at airports or near airports. They see these drones, shattered glass, and they don't understand what's happening. Question: how long can Russia withstand this level of chaos? And do you think that at this point, this can be called a controlled crisis in Russia's rear, managed by the Ukrainian armed forces?
No. Well, the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian general staff, and Ukrainian security agencies are creating managed chaos and trying to create a perfect storm in Russia is obvious. The fact that Western intelligence agencies and Western partners are trying to help with this is also obvious. Collapsing airports, explosions of huge railway tracks, burning oil depots, burning ports, the destruction of the command staff of Vladimir Putin's most important combat brigades, constant drone strikes on key directions, the destruction of factories, the destruction of enterprises in the Russian Federation's defense industry, the destruction of warehouses and arsenals in various regions of Russia, direct threats to and destruction of Russian combat aviation, threats to Vladimir Putin's nuclear triad. All of this undermines the defensive and offensive potential of the Russian Federation. Accordingly, Putin needs to find money for repairs, for fixing things. He needs to find money, but there is no money and he needs to find it quickly. So where can he find it? Take it from his own people, take it from the population. The people start to smoke. That is, we are creating, you see, right inside Russia, we are creating a crisis where Putin has to look for money, where the people are demanding, give us money, complaining and so on. There is no money. And gradually, we are bringing this whole situation to the point where the level of discontent in Russia will reach such a limit that the Putin elite, not the people, but the Putin elite, will start to consider a regime change. And as soon as they start thinking about it, I believe it is extremely important that they get some help from all sides, so to speak, because today many are interested in removing Vladimir Putin from power. And I think that everything is gradually moving in that direction. Call it whatever you want, a coup, a putsch, turmoil. Call it whatever you like. The essence does not change because of that. Rebellion. The essence does not change, it does not change. There is only one important thing here. Why did Vladimir Putin start brandishing the nuclear club? If he started brandishing the nuclear club, it means, first of all, that he is losing strategically, and he understands this. Secondly, it means that his regime is under threat. Look, they have distributed 1 million weapons to security personnel of various levels across the country. This shows that they are very afraid of uprisings. They are very afraid of their own soldiers, whom they send as cannon fodder to the front, mobilized men, contract soldiers, and so on. They are very afraid of some local elite who might just decide to gather a certain group and, as they say, take action, right? To stand up for their rights, their money, and their lives, which is the most important thing. They are afraid of all of this. We don't know about many of the processes happening inside Russia, but I think, Dasha, that August will really surprise us.
China is a very important factor. Just before our interview, I read that China does not intend to stop buying energy resources from Russia. He finds it unpleasant and uncomfortable that there is international pressure on his domestic policy. He made an official statement that China's domestic policy is no one else's business and that he will make decisions himself. China is a very important factor. Their relationship with Russia is undoubtedly that of vassal and suzerain. It's clear to everyone who the vassal is and who the suzerain is. And many sinologists, China experts tell me that China is the beneficiary of Russian aggression and that China is the only one who can stop Putin today. Sasha, to what extent do you think this is the case? And how will the US negotiate with China, considering that she has invited Trump to Beijing on September 3rd?
They'll make a deal behind Russia's back. The question is about Taiwan, and that's the most crucial issue. Because of Taiwan, Israel, Ukraine, and many other things are happening right now. China is orchestrating this war. China is the main player. China ordered Putin to start this war. Putin is China's hand, and he is carrying out China's wishes. On the other hand, Putin would also very much like for China to weaken a bit and for China and the US to wear each other out so that Putin and his regime could gain some strength. This is all an old story. Since Stalin's time, it has always flourished, always been undermined. But nevertheless, for me, listen, this doesn't come as any surprise. China, it would be one thing if it only bought energy resources, but it sends North Korean soldiers to Russia. It sends machinery to Russia. It builds defense enterprises on Russian territory, including for the production of unmanned aerial vehicles, those very Shaheds and not just Shaheds. It sends chips to Russia so that Russia can equip its missiles with them. And these are precision missiles, right? Precision missiles. All of this is happening. China is financing Putin, and I'm glad that the European Union has finally started considering sanctions against China. As soon as the Europeans impose tough sanctions, I hope that sooner or later this will happen. I'm not expecting this to happen right now, but nevertheless, as soon as the Europeans impose tough sanctions against China, China will put an end to this mess against Ukraine and abandon Putin, because the Chinese will not risk losing the European market. It's one thing if they have problems with the Americans, but how will they handle it then? But it's a completely different matter if such a huge market on which the Chinese economy depends, like Europe, suddenly turns away from China 180 degrees and shows them its backside. So what will Comrade Xi do then? Will he abandon Putin? Because the Putin market, the Russian market, is of no use to him. He only needs a poor Russian Federation, in the literal sense, a destitute, impoverished Russian Federation. Let's put it that way. An impoverished Russian Federation with a frenzied population buying everything Chinese and getting nothing from China in return, and raw materials that China will receive. You know, Dasha, I also want to add something. Finally, we remembered the regions. It's burning there and there and there as well. Right now, there really is a catastrophe in the Donetsk region, in Donetsk, and in a number of other cities temporarily occupied by Russia because there is no water there. You've probably seen those videos, right? When little girls ask Putin, Uncle Vova, give us water. I won't go into details right now. Yes, they're urinating into bags there. They're basically not drinking water. They're not washing. They're not eating. Obviously, there's dysentery there. Obviously, there are very serious problems there. But I'd like to focus attention on other things. Because talking about what the Russian world is and what it brings with it no longer makes any sense. We've understood this for a long time. But Putin called in all those thugs, the Golaites from Donetsk, from the occupied Donetsk region. They came to him and he started asking, what about the pipeline that was supposed to deliver water from the Rostov region, from Rostov Oblast to the territory of Donetsk? The answer, it wasn't built. And why is that? First, they allocated 70 billion, then 200 billion rubles. So why wasn't the pipeline built? Why is there no water? Well, it was stolen. The question is, who stole it? Attention, here's the answer. Out of the blue, it was Putin who suddenly took an interest in this pipeline. It was Timur Ivanov, the former deputy to Shoigu, who stole it. And once again, this was exposed. Attention, question, is a public flogging, or rather a public execution of Sergei Shoigu being prepared? Is Putin preparing to dispose of him publicly so that everyone can see? I think so. I think an execution of Shoigu is being prepared, a disposal of Shoigu, let's call it that. But it will be public and the punishment will be obvious so that everyone can see. Tuva has already been destroyed. All the deputies, the Ministry of Emergency Situations has been destroyed. The Ministry of Defense has been destroyed. Generals have been taken into custody. All his deputies have either gone missing or have been detained. In other words, it's the end for Shoigu. For now, he's still walking around, but he's afraid just like everyone else there. The question is different. If they take Shoigu, will the generals panic? Because the generals were feeding off this womb. You see, they were feeding off this very womb. So it seems to me that after Shoigu, Gerasimov will go and the generals will follow. And then it will simply be necessary to act preemptively. If they start cracking down on Shoigu, then the generals will have no other choice but to remove Putin. But they won't remove him, so they themselves will fall under repression, under Vladimir Putin's harsh crackdown. That's why we should expect the harshest reprisals against Shoigu, Gerasimov, and the generals in the near future.
Now, this is a very interesting topic, and we will definitely continue it on Sunday. Friends, Sasha and I work twice a week on my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya, and on Dimitri Gordon's YouTube channel. Please write a few kind words in support of our tandem in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, share your location, and write some warm words in support of the Defense Forces, the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and the Ukrainian Special Services. Sasha, thank you very much. That was politician Alexander Demchenko. See you next time.
Thank you, Dasha. Until we meet again. Bye.